So we've been talking a lot about kind of the value of video and how it's challenged because we can't deliver to the reach and frequency sort of expectations of television, right? I mean, but I heard from you earlier that folks want to use data and they want to target, you know, when they're buying digital video. I mean, what's the real story there? Tell me what you're actually, where you're seeing dollars move and how bigger dollars are moving through the pipes.
So right now we have a ton of demand on our inventory. So we're selling it the sort of old-fashioned internet way with using the data that we have, whether it's first-party data or data through our data providers. So that's working well for us. But of course, you know, as our scale expands and the type of deals that we want to do, the demand that we're seeing from folks like Group M, for example, and some of their top-tier clients, you know, they're sort of demanding that that we use OCR, and we certainly see it as a way for us to compare apples to apples across mediums. And then also, you know, I was talking to Andrew earlier a little bit about XCR. Mobile is really important for us, and so for us to have a measurement that equates a GRP across, you know, our desktop, our mobile, our over-the-top devices, all the places where we serve video is a really important value proposition that we can bring to a client.
At what point do we come full circle and shoot ourselves in the foot? Because the purpose of, you know, mechanics like OCR is to make the industry more, it's to make it more approachable and apples to apples and digestible, right? But if we then differentiate that by channel, and then you've got a different metric that looks at, you know, I mean, because then we go so far as to say, for example, a tablet, media consumption on a 7-inch versus a 10-inch tablet is totally different. How far do we take that to a point of actually delivering accurate meaning and creating value rather?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great start to have a metric that you can measure across, and then you can always add in different layers, and that's kind of what we've done, and being able to add in, like I said, the first-party data, the other data that we have that's specific to each medium. And then when you're talking about the different platforms, you know, there's a lot of specific data that you can bring in, whether it's a tablet or whether it's a mobile device, that can help, you know, just add to the mix and add to the value. Ultimately, you know, we talked about reach, we talked about resonance, and we talked about reaction. In the Nielsen model, that reaction part of it is something that we can bring, you know, the other data sources help enhance that, I feel. If
you have to, you know, sort of as a platform with a lot of inventory, if you sort of had to say, what's your favorite means by which to sell and move your inventory, what is that? Is it OCR today because it's easy and it's actionable and it taps into TV dollars, or is it moving on impressions basis? You know, I mean, reach and frequency is hard, performance is hard too. It's fuzzy math when you talk about real sort of attribution measurement. Like, where would you rather, you know, risk your sort of top line if you had to choose one?
If I had to choose one?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, when we're talking about the reserve inventory that we sell directly, you know, I think in the next year, when we're talking about upfronts and we're talking about, you know, securing those upfront dollars, you know, in a reserve marketplace, I think that OCR is going to be hugely important. On the programmatic side, when you're talking about real-time bidding and all of that, I don't think that OCR is there yet, but you know, as we had talked about, you know, that it's more second-day data, and you talked a little bit about that in regards to AOL. You know, we're moving a lot of inventory in that channel as well, and so it's not really necessarily tied to OCR.
I mean, it just, consistently the conversation, and I think this is the natural maturation of a marketplace, is the buy side sort of matures faster, right? And the supply side right now, publishers, publishers are getting hammered, right? Every way you slice it. Like, there is investment, whether it's venture capital or whatever, you know, agencies, sort of business models are challenged and they're scared. So how do pure play digital content creators and publishers like survive? Is it only through consolidation and aggregation? Like, I mean, is it only through programmatic and reducing overhead costs? Like, what's the next 36 months look like for the pure online video content creators?
Well, I mean, hopefully it's good, because we're in that business, and we feel like, you know, we're still seeing tremendous demand.
And you're thriving, though. Let's be clear. You're thriving.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, you guys are kicking ass and taking names. So.
We are.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that again, a tool like OCR is able to connect us with the entire ecosystem, so it's a bridge, or the Rosetta Stone, as you said. So I think that that's always a valuable tool to be able to give buyers something that they can have to translate, your inventory across all mediums.
Okay, so I've asked this question a couple of times. I think it's really interesting. If your job title was digital video buyer,
yes,
what would you be focusing most of your mind share and time
80%
on right now?
digital, 20%.
No, I'm not asking about the budget. I'm saying if you were a digital video buyer, and I will ask that question if you'd like me to, but I'm going to give you a totally different scenario now that you've already called it for me. So if you're a digital video buyer, I mean, where would you be spending your time? Is it programmatic? Is it ad networks, video ad networks? Is it buying direct? Is it in creating long form content for adjacency and native advertising? Where, if you were responsible for driving ROI in video for a major brand, where do you think the biggest bang for the buck is today?
Well, I think one area that we have an advantage in to this question and also to your last question is that there's pockets of content out there that aren't necessarily tied to an offline component. So we just started a deal and really distributing from Maker Studio, for example. And they have a series called Epic Rap Battle. And these have these massive audiences that are around them, but are really not tied to an offline franchise. And I think that's an interesting area to reach people that aren't necessarily watching a ton of television, especially in the younger demographics. And as you see these viewing habits, whether it's on mobile or whether it's on these online type of series, you see those viewing habits changing. And you see things bubbling up from the online as opposed to going from offline to online. And so that's an interesting area where I think, especially depending on who you're trying to reach, if you're a Red Bull or if you're Virgin Mobile, which is one of our advertisers that's trying to reach a younger demographic, that's a helpful area to focus on.
The reason I ask the question is because it's interesting. The purpose of this is measurement and standardization, which allows for a tipping point of sort of scale and aggregation, right? But the reality is that almost everyone with whom we've spoken at some point goes back to sight, sound, and motion as a storytelling medium, and that's what allows it to kind of rise above display, right? And not and sort of escape the race to the bottom that is display, right? Scarcity is part of that. But how do you operationalize that at scale? That seems like one of the big challenges of video, is that there is a qualitative factor that makes it really hard to kind of, just make it formulaic.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've tried to package it together. So to take an example of Virgin Mobile, this will be the third year in a row that we've live streamed their Virgin Mobile Free Fest. So we do an activation that not only includes, aggregating all the videos that we have from those type of artists before the show, the live show itself, and post, and then also include that with category specific. So in that way, kind of aggregate all of the stuff in that vertical to create a package that's interesting and scalable for an advertiser.